Partner and Head, Technology Advisory Services and Markets, KPMG. Are you here, sir? Mr. Joseph? Oh, okay. Lovely. Yes. So that will take place in there. Mr. Tegwe is the moderator. Engineer Chidi Casey Izuwa, Acting Director General and CEO, Infrastructure Concession and Regulatory Commission, will be the lead discussant. Other discussants, are you here, sir? Engineer Chidi Izuwa. Lovely. Thank you, sir. Then we'll have Engineer Musa Mahmoud Dansarki, who is Director Operations, Kano Line. Are you here, sir? Oh, lovely. You're there. Oh, beautiful. So you're going in there. Yes. And then Dr. Salam Taiwo, or Taiwo Salam, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Transportation, Lagos. He is to join that panel. Mr. Abiodun Otunla, Managing Director, Planet Projects Limited, is also a discussant. If you're here, Mr. Otunla, kindly move towards the transport discussion point. And finally, Engineer Abiodun Dabiri, Managing Director, Lagos Metropolitan Area Transport Authority. Will require him to, yeah, there you are. Okay, we'll see you in there. Now, this is our appeal, that these panels that we have constituted to either side of the hall in their breakout sessions are not talking to themselves. We request some members of the audience to kindly join the discussion over there. The power discussion will take place here. Now, this is our intention. We have lost some time. We want to catch up with time. To do that, we are limiting these discussions that would take place simultaneously to not more than 25 minutes, because we still have 2 other sessions to take place this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a lovely discussion.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, can we have all our panelists on the stage?
So I'll come down to invite those who would want to follow me to some of these other sessions. Thank you. Yes.
Would actually like to get started, ladies and gentlemen,
Power.
so that we can keep to time, and we have our moderator
No,
already
I'm
on
coming
the
to
stage.
assist. It's on already.
So I think I'd just like to hand over to him to start with the panel discussion.
Good, wonderful.
That's not working?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have to change our initial plan, because if we have only 25 minutes,
1, 2.
then clearly we will have to work within that time.
1, 2.
So I think
we need to check that all the mics are working.
distinguished ladies and gentlemen, there will be no protocols in this session.
Can anyone from outside hear me? We need some help with the technical.
All right, please get off the microphone for us here. Thank you. Go ahead.
We have too many microphones operating here. Anyway, as I said, no protocols. We will go straight into discussing the subject matter for this session. And what I'll do, because we have only 25 minutes, I'm going to take 2 minutes or 2.5 just to give an overview of the topic. Then I'll ask the lead presenter to speak for 5 minutes. And then the 3 other panelists will then each speak for 3 minutes. And we will have some time left for interaction with the audience, because I think that is just as important as the contribution of the discussants. The topic before us is opportunities open to states for enhancing the provision of power in their jurisdictions. Now, I think we all know, that is why we're here, that constant, reliable, affordable supply of electricity is so critical to economic development that indeed what has kept Nigeria down over the past 3 decades has been the failure to keep supply of electricity at that level. And I believe that we all know the key issues. We know the challenges, so I'm not going to read all of them. But clearly, one of the key issues is weak infrastructure, whether you're looking at distribution, transmission, or indeed generation. And of course, the structure of the sector, the structure of the market has not been helpful either to investors, to operators, or indeed even to consumers. And because of that, the power sector has not grown the way it should. But there are opportunities, and it is perhaps because of these opportunities that this kind of discussion becomes germane and very necessary. First, one of the opportunities that is now present is that the power sector has been privatized. So policy has been directed to encouraging and supporting the private sector to invest and operate in the industry. And that has clearly many, many opportunities, either for the investors or even for the consumers. The second is that we are aware of the reforms that the federal government and indeed some state governments are introducing into the management and operations of the sector, as particularly the investment in infrastructure on a massive scale. We know that the federal government has been investing massively in infrastructure over the past 20 years. But I think it is only in this recent period that we've seen this investment being consistent and being perhaps effective in the sense that it is being directed at the appropriate linkages of the power sector chain. And there are other strong opportunities. For instance, the international community has been very helpful. We heard recently that the World Bank has provided credit of almost $500 million, or is it $1 billion, for the growth of the power grid. I think it's 500 million. So clearly with these opportunities, there is now a chance that both the governments, the states and the federal, as well as investors and other participants in the sector should see these opportunities to bring about improvement in the sector. Now, we know that in spite of these efforts by governments at various levels, the gaps have remained very, very wide. For instance, up to today, the highest peak of electricity supply is at about 5,000 megawatts. And that is totally inadequate given Nigeria's expectations and consumption. We know that losses are still so high in the system, largely because of inadequate maintenance and and the failure of the system as a whole, the infrastructure. In some regions, we see these total aggregate losses running up to about 60%. So clearly, this is a huge issue that has to be addressed. And indeed, there are other gaps which have to do with the poor tariff structure and the market structure. So the question really is, what can state governments do to enhance the power supply in their jurisdictions so that economic activity, economic growth can move apace? Now, obviously, we know some states are doing better than others. And this is the opportunity, therefore, for some states to learn, for one state to learn from another. We are aware, for instance, that the Lagos state government has been working very hard to improve not only the infrastructure, but also the regulatory environment in the sector. I think about a few weeks ago, the state governor enacted a law, the State Electricity Reform Law, which is to facilitate the intervention of the state government in the various value chains of the sector, so that we can see more power available and sustainable in the state. So what can we learn from the experience of Lagos state government? There are other areas that can be explored. For instance, we are aware that the introduction of renewable power, particularly solar and wind and so on, offers tremendous opportunities for states to work with private partners to generate more power in their states and perhaps also to make it available to their industries. So the question, therefore, is how do we capture these opportunities? What can the states do? What can the states learn from each other in order to enhance power supply in their jurisdictions? I will stop here and ask the lead presenter, Engineer Shehu, who was, as I'm sure you're aware, the past president of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, to make a 5-minute presentation. I'll make it 7, so that we can do it. And then we take it up from there. Engineer Shehu, over to you. Yes, you can go there if you want to.
Our session moderator, our panelists, distinguished participants, good afternoon to everyone. I have a small presentation to make on this issue of the opportunities open to the states, governments in enhancing the provision of power. First of all, it will be very important if we can appreciate the status of the power supply in the country. The contents of my introduction of my presentation runs as follows: introduction, then Kano and Lagos states, what are the efforts they are making in terms of improving power supply in the states, then what are also the opportunities available in those particular states. Next slide. As an introduction, we have to appreciate as a country, where are we? We have a country with an area of 923,000 square kilometers, a population of 184 million people, and our installed generation capacity is about 12,500 megawatts. And the maximum we have attained so far is actually around 7,000 megawatts, and that was very transient also. But the normal generation runs between 4,500 to 5,000 megawatts, as highlighted by our moderator. That does not mean that the federal government is not conscious of this problem, and in recognizing that problem, there are so many sectoral reforms and policies on the ground to make sure that these issues are being tabled. Some of these are policies and some are projects. And some of the projects the federal government is embarking is the Mambila Hydro Power Station, whose contract has been signed. And certainly if that project is achieved, we are going to increase our generation capacity with 3,050 megawatts. The 450 megawatts Azura station, which the Vice President has also mentioned earlier today. And we also have Zungeru Power Station as well as Apang Power Station, which is being actually expanded. If you come to the states, we have Lagos State here with an area of 3,500 kilometers square, a population of 12,550,596 according to National Bureau of Statistics. Of course, I know there is a lot of politics on population of Lagos and Kano. And their estimated electricity demand is 2,566 megawatts. And that does not even include the suppressed load, both on-grid and off-grid. But in reality, what they are getting from the national grid is ranging around 770 megawatts. So if you look at the gap in power supply availability, you will know that there is a lot of opportunities for investors to come and key into this sector. And of course, because Lagos State is more or less an urban state, because the land mass is very small, most of the population is in the urban area, and that is why the electricity access is almost 100%. But if you come to Kano, we have a land mass area of 20,000 kilometers square, which is more than 5.5 times Kano, and a population of about 13 million. Estimated electricity demand is 700 megawatts, but what we are getting averagely is around 120 megawatts daily. And our electricity access is around 67.8 megawatts. Next slide. In recognition of this huge deficit, the Kano state government has taken decision to move forward at least to make some initiatives towards bridging this electricity deficit. And to that effect, this Chalawa hydropower station, whose contract has been signed, and the construction will very soon start. Then the 7.2 megawatts hydropower station is about 75% completed. Then we also have the 100 megawatt Angote and Black Rhino solar PV farm, which is at the design stage. And I just confirmed from Engineer Mansour Ahmed that the formal taking over of the site has been done between the state government and the Angote group. And I'm sure of the other 100 megawatts solar PV farm also to be undertaken by Grand Solar and Arewa Solar, which is also whose site has been identified, and they have taken over the site. This is okay. Then electricity potentials in Kano. This is where the investors should be interested in. Kano is endowed with a lot of dams. We have Chalawa, we have Tiga, we have Kafinchuri, we have Gari Dam, we have Magaga, we have Bagauda, we have Wase Dam, and other smaller dams, about 20 dams whose potentials for hydropower could be harnessed. And Kano is also about 734 kilometers from Agadem gas field. I am putting this because it's also an opportunity for us to know that there is a possibility of having gas pipeline from Agadem in Niger Republic to Kano, because availability of gas to any city is key to development. If there is no gas, there is no development. And of course, it's about 600 kilometers from sources of gas deposits. Gas deposits. Then Kano State is also endowed with a lot of solar intensity, which is over 2,000 megawatts. It is also 683 kilometers from Ajakuta for the construction of AKK gas pipeline. It will be of interest to let this House know that the federal government has a program of what they call AKK, that is Ajakuta Kaduna Kano gas pipeline. Presently, the federal government has already signed the contract, with 3 contractors for the construction of this gas pipeline, and it is the intention of the federal government also associated with the gas supply to have power stations in Abuja, in Kano, as well as in Kaduna. In fact, in Kano, the intention is to have 1,350 megawatts power station in Kano. Then there is also deficit of power transmission and distribution infrastructure in Kano. As we all know, as of today, sometimes you have generation in excess of what the system can take. So there is this huge gap at the transmission and distribution levels, which if we don't bridge them, no matter how much we generate at the generating stations, we cannot utilize them at the load centers. And of course, Kano has close proximity to the inland basins in Sokoto, Chad, Bida for exploration and production of hydrocarbon. These are opportunities also to recognize and also to make sure that we tap them. Then, if you talk of Lagos State, they also have some initiatives. They have signed the electricity reform bill into law. They have also taken a decision to provide additional 4,000 megawatts of power through accelerated deployment of an embedded power plant from now to 2020, from now to 2022. And they have all these IPP power stations, 12.5 in Akute mainland, inland power. All these are completed IPPs dedicated to serve specific loads in Lagos. And these are the power stations. Next. Then these are the potentials available in Lagos. They also have some degree of solar potential. Of course, the presence of Egbin Thermal Station is an advantage to Lagos because Egbin Thermal Station is producing 1,320 megawatts. I'm glad to have the chairman of Egbin Thermal Station close to me this afternoon, and I was just telling him that that was my first port of call after my NYSC, that is 30 years ago. Then proximity to the offshore Ade field, then we have the West African gas pipeline. We also have the offshore wind, which is available, and of course the Apapa port. Regulations for investment in the electricity sector, I think it will be covered by my colleague from the NERC. Then I have some recommendations. Slide. Okay, state governments to consider provision of adequate and reliable power supply as one of their primary responsibilities by shouldering initial stages provision of land at concessionaires and ensuring security of investment. When I say security of investment here, I don't mean only the physical security of the investment. It also includes commercial security of the investment, in the sense that if an investor, puts his money to generate electricity or to transmit or to generate, he gets money for what he has done. Because as at now, there is a serious problem because the payment of electricity is extremely very low. As at 2016, it is very sad to note that the average payment of electricity by all the discos is less than 30%. Then there is a need for the state governments to create a dynamic and reliable infrastructure data center, what I can call infrastat center, that can lead to making informed investment decisions. One of the problems we have in this sector is that one of the problems we have as far as investment is concerned is lack of access to accurate and reliable data based on which investors can work with. So if state governments can have this kind of data center, and any investor, when he comes to the state, he will have reliable data based on which to base his decision, that will help in a very, in no small measure in attracting investors. Then, of course, as for Kano, we can think of the possibility of having mini-grid technology to, focusing on our solar and water potential, so that those areas without electricity could be covered. Then the other one is the issue of licensing of electricity infrastructure. Really, this is one of the biggest issues. Licensing of electricity infrastructure, both generation, transmission, and distribution is a problem. I'm happy the NERC man is there. Let him know that people are really not finding it funny as far as licensing the electricity infrastructure is concerned. In conclusion, while recognizing all the efforts by the federal government in improving power supply throughout the country, Lagos and Kano State should take all deliberate efforts towards self-sufficiency in electricity supply for the domestic, commercial, and industrial needs. The population and the markets are very much available, to support the projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can we have a round of applause for Engineer Shehu? Well, our lead discussant has given a broad brush of the sector and particularly pointed out some of the opportunities in both Lagos and Kano for states to key into either on their own or along with private partners to enhance the power supply. Now, since we have Engineer Adesina, who is the chairman of Egbin plant, I think it's only fair to give him the next opportunity to highlight, particularly in this context, what is happening in Lagos, what new opportunities can he see, and how can other states, not just Lagos, actually learn from these initiatives in order to increase their power supply. Engineer Adesina, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Because of time, I will just dive straight into the key issues that we need to discuss and understand today. At EGMI Power PLC, just like Engineer Shehu said, we currently have an installed capacity of 1,320 megawatts. Of the 1,320 megawatts that we can deploy from EGMI, as of today, we're able to do 640 megawatts. The reason for this is that we have constraints with regards to transmission of the electricity. There is transmission constraints that tells us that, look, you have to depress the load to 640 that we are currently doing. So I would want to encourage the state government to go down to brass tacks with regards to resolving some of the problems I'm going to be highlighting. And I'm glad that His Excellency Governor Ganduje is back here with us so that that message can sink in and he can help equally take it to the appropriate quarters at the level of the federal government. Apart from transmission as a key enabler for deploying electricity, a critical component of the message that Engineer Shehu gave us is the fact that the price of the commodity must be commercially sensible. And the way he put it, to be precise, he said there must be commercial security for the investors. If the price of the commodity is lower than the cost of production, you can imagine what will follow. Electricity is not a Nigerian product, it's a global product. So to that extent, there is a universal formula and fundamentals that enables electricity availability everywhere in the world. Until Nigeria wakes up to the realization that those fundamentals and enablers are to be provided and are provided, that is when we will truly be able to deploy electricity in the country. Beyond pricing, which I'm still going to speak to in a separate way, in a very different way, part of the other initiative or enablers required is gas supply. Without you having gas for a thermal plant, a gas-fired power plant, the plant becomes a museum. It cannot generate electricity to Nigerians. As we speak today, Nigeria, like was stated by Engineer Shehu, is generating approximately about 5,000 megawatts. This is a nation that has the capacity to generate today. If all our machines are working and transmission issues have been resolved, we can do 7,000 megawatts. But we cannot because of some of the other constraints that we are highlighting. So to that extent, gas availability is very, very essential for there to be electricity. Now, taking it down to the states, Lagos State has done something so unique, which we would want to commend the governor of Lagos State for. What is always a major problem in Nigeria is the disconnect between vision, the plan, implementation, and everyday action that will make the vision possible. The governor went down to the fundamentals. First, he came to us, the practitioners of the sector, to ask what we require that would engender regular supply of electricity. This was tabulated. He went into to see the regulator himself with his troops, and they were able to equally dimension what the regulator could do to help fast-track the vision articulated by the governor. The governor came back, had a meeting with the stakeholders, that is the citizens of the state, at a forum, and at that forum it was all unanimously decided that electricity is #1 priority for Lagos. For Lagos to get to the level that is desired, electricity must be made available. The stakeholders all adopted that particular strategy, with the governor sitting at that particular session. The governor took it to the State House of Assembly, and gladly we have today a legal instrument backing the initiative that will galvanize electricity availability in Lagos State. As EGMI Power PLC, the contribution we have pledged, and we will definitely make sure we deliver into Lagos, is a dedicated 450 megawatt power plant. We're going to be deploying into Lagos itself 450 megawatts, which the governor is backing as we speak today. Ultimately, please note, if the consumer that is going to take the electricity does not have, 1, the capacity to pay, 2, the wires are in bad condition, 3, there are no transformers. If all these issues are not taken care of with metering in order to calibrate the energy they are receiving, this is going to be a pipe dream. But the document that government and governor of Lagos State signed to recently has been able to cover the critical gaps that are inherent in supply of electricity in Lagos as we speak today. Beyond the thermal availability that we are going to be pushing, we equally have the intention of pushing the renewable agenda of government.
Yeah, 1 moment, please.
Well, the intention here is that if we can deploy to different clusters using renewable technology, it will be easier for us to boil those small components rather than boil the ocean of Nigeria. So it is incumbent on us to be able to use this hybrid solution to be able to give electricity to everybody. But it is important that I state this, which is why I love the presentation by Professor Jega earlier, that the governance structure, the value system, the fundamentals are issues that we must all deal with, and deal with frontally for us to have electricity. By way of closing remark from me at this point, Korea was where Nigeria and Korea were on the same pedestal in the 60s. I went to Korea in 2006. Korea was doing, as at 2006, 46,000 megawatts. Today in Korea, they are doing 106,000 megawatts. Between the time I went in 2006 and now, they've been able to add additional 6,000 megawatts to their system. So that explains, without anybody digging deep, the reason why the GDP, why the wealth of the nation, why the national income, while the brand equity of Korea has risen so geometrically as against Nigeria. If we truly want to become a great nation, electricity is the bedrock, is the catalytic factor that we all require to make that happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wanda. A round of applause for him. Well, thank you. I think one of the take-home issue here is the need for all stakeholders to work together. And government has a responsibility to bring the stakeholders together in this regard. Now, Tifase, you are not only the provider of power systems, but also you work with governments all over the world to be able to help them expand electricity supply. And you've been in Lagos long enough to know, and in Nigeria all your life. So what do you think states can do, given the background we have had from Engineer Shehu and Engineer Kola, Desina, in enhancing power supply, both in the short and long term? Tifase, please.
Thank you, Engineer Munson. Afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'm going to borrow a bit from what Engineer Shehu and Kola have said, and even a bit of what was said in the previous session, which was moderated by Professor Jega. First of all, for any country to thrive competitively, and let's not forget why we're here. We're here because this is the Lagos Kano Economic and Investment Summit. So we're really here to talk about how we can create prosperity in the state, and energy just happens to be one of those enablers. But for us, before we start talking about energy, we need to understand what is being done in other climes, and I understand that is part of what I will talk about. What are the standards being set? You can't have standards if you don't have a vision, first of all. So it was very important for me when His Excellency, the Lagos State Governor, said he dreams about what he wants to achieve. And trust me, sometimes you're dreaming you're flying. You're not dreaming you're walking, because you have to dream you can do things that you can't do in real life. So that's the first problem. I think we are planning, but we're planning very modestly. And the Lagos State Governor said he's dreaming and thinking about things that aren't on ground now. So in essence, he's developing plans in his head. He's setting ambitious targets. And why? Because they are realistic. We've seen all the KPIs and all the factors about Nigeria, about Lagos, Kano. We understand we have the critical mass. We have the natural resources. Kola spoke about gas limiting production for EGBI. We have copious volumes of gas reserves in Nigeria. And how are we utilizing these things? And so let me paint a picture of what I think are the 4 critical steps. First of all, I've said leadership and visioning are very critical. Secondly, planning. We have to have structured plans in place. And again, I will commend His Excellency, the Lagos State Governor, for driving the electric power reform bill for Lagos. I wonder if we'll understand how groundbreaking it is right now. Maybe it's years from now when we start to see the dividends that will understand what was done this year by him signing that bill into law. I also want to commend the Commissioner of Energy, Olawale Oluwo, for his inclusive and participatory process for coming up with the plans that drove the electric power reform. But what is the electric power reform bill really all about? It's creating an enabling environment for investment so that when you, as an OEM or as a power developer or even as a regulator, look at Lagos State, you can say that all the necessary factors to encourage foreign direct investment or even local entrepreneurs to participate are there. There's guarantees for gas investors. They're almost able to, there's a bankable structure for gas investors, and you move then to the power developers. There's a bankable structure where they're able to rely on revolving letters of credit from the state. You look at revenue collection, which is also the responsibility of the state. So there we're seeing, again, transparency. We're seeing a focus on ensuring maximum returns vis-a-vis the investments made, and the state is taking responsibility for the entire value chain. So you, as an investor, can look at Lagos State and say, well, there's a plan in place, there's been a grid study, a power map. Lagos State understands where I want to evacuate gas, where I want to situate my power plants, how I want the discos to be involved, the royalties I'm charging, paying the discos, the tariffs that I will charge to the end consumer so they get a stable power supply and are able to drive their businesses, but are also, the investors are also able to make a healthy profit. So it's a bankable and transparent sector, and that's just the planning edge. And now we get to the second level, which is after you've had these plans in place, and coming to Kano State, maybe more relevant for Kano State over Lagos State is that in Kano State you have an even more diverse demographic environment. You have masses, a more significant ratio of masses so rural to urban area, and there you have to take care of the rural areas, and there you need different mechanisms than what Lagos State has deployed. In my opinion, there you have to understand how you can deal with really small distributed energy solutions. We're looking at solar energy providers that are providing home-based solar solutions. Also these solutions are provided, so let's say, free upfront, and you pay a monthly fee for accessing this power. So that might be more rural for rural areas. But then you're also looking at diversifying your energy mix beyond that and saying, how can I leverage my hydro power sources? I learned today that Kano has, I think, 20 dams or more and counting, and then also looking at how can I leverage, everyone has said wind doesn't work for Nigeria. I don't necessarily agree. We know there are vast expanse of land in the north that may be attractive for wind power. how can I utilize gas because gas will be available. The third leg of that is then leveraging digitalization and automation to start to squeeze out energy efficiency flows. And this is where you start to see that energy is not only enabling an investment climate, but also creating greater returns for investors. Not underestimate the implications of foregoing that aspect of the entire story. We must train people that are able to maintain and operate this infrastructure, Nigerians, young Nigerians, because we heard today also about the youth bulge. I never heard it said in such terms, but the youth bulge is also an opportunity while we see it as a threat. How can we leverage locals to take care of this sector? Now, I want to quickly touch on a best practice standard that Siemens has deployed in Egypt. In Egypt, we sat with the Egyptian government, and the Egyptian government said we want to double our power installed capacity. We want to grow it by 50%. And Siemens said, don't worry, in 2.5 years, I will deliver you 16.6 gigawatts. What we're talking about now in Nigeria is that we're generating on a daily basis 5 megawatts with potential for 7 megawatts. In Egypt, Siemens has worked with the Egyptian government to do what I said first, come up with a plan. Secondly, to also support you with delivering the necessary gas infrastructure, the power plants, the integration into the grid. So we are synchronizing these plants into the grid. We're going from gas to generation to transmission and distribution. Thirdly, Siemens has also worked with the Egyptian government to invest in a local gas blade turbine factory. Now, this is the local content aspect I spoke about. Being able to manufacture with the cooperation of the German government, a training facility, a world-class training facility in Germany. That is to train the masses in Egypt. To train the masses of Egyptians who work in maintaining this infrastructure. We'll train them not only on operations and maintenance, but on philosophy and on leadership, on management, on vocational skills. I think this, I want to wrap up by saying, I think ultimately, I go back to what I said in the beginning, we need to dream the right way. We need to understand we can do this. Companies like Siemens, Kola and I said we're sister and brother. We're sister and brother because we're in the same boat. Siemens is working also with Egwin PLC to try to support their future visions and plans in exactly the same way I described for Egypt. Thank you very much.
Tipasi. Clearly, a vision, plan, investment climate for power investors. Selecting your energy mix, I think this is very important, particularly for the two states that are involved. Kano, you have hydro, you have solar, you have wind. I think there's tremendous opportunities there to explore different energy mix sources. And of course, building capacity. I think it is so absolutely important that we cannot build institutions if we don't have the human capacity to manage and run these institutions. So capacity building is absolutely essential. But let me now go to Malan Sharfuddin. You are the monitor of the industry, the regulator. And I would like you to focus on two issues. States, we have seen from Lagos State, are able to make laws and regulations for the sector in a way that obviously enhances supply within their own jurisdiction. But as the national regulator, where do you see the potential either of conflict or of synergy between the states and the national level, especially in terms of policies and regulations? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, moderator, and very good afternoon to my fellow discussants and the participants. Lagos State actually is a state that is very unique in the sense that in virtually most of what they do it with passion, they do it with doggedness, and they do it with commitment. And they do it based on a position of knowledge. So to a large extent, I will say we won't have any conflict with what Lagos State has done. Because before they start this, they went to the regulator, they sat with us, and we discussed or we iron out issues of possible conflict. We all know that electricity is something that is in the concurrent legislative list, which means both state and the federal government can legislate on it. So that means it is not something that is only the prerequisite of the federal government to do. It is within the powers of state to also legislate on that. But despite that, they didn't went on their own and just came out with a legislation that will regulate electricity business in Lagos. They came to us and we agree as to what they ought to do. Then I think I need to address some other issues also, which I believe other states can be able to benefit. We all know that this sector has been fully privatized. We no longer have what we know at the PSCN. We now have 11 privatized distribution companies. And all the 36 state governments in Nigeria have shares in these 11 distribution companies. Yes, we haven't allotted shares, but soon the federal government will allot shares to states. So it means state must show interest in what these distribution companies are doing.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is an announcement for across the 3 rooms. We have 5 minutes to the end of all the sessions. 5 minutes. Thank you.
Just like what Lagos has done, just like what Kola Addition has mentioned, the Lagos State Governor sat with the distribution companies. He was able to determine what their handicaps are. What are the things, what are the challenges making them unable to deliver service to Lagosians? Based on that, he was able to come with a plan. In the next 2 to 3 years, Lagos State Government is committing about 60 billion naira into the network of Eko and Ikeja. Some people may ask, why? Why are they making these commitments? They are making it to develop their state, to develop their economy. What does 24/7 electricity means? It means better security.
1 minute, please.
Reduced unemployment, increased opportunities for everyone. My recommendation here is that Lagos State has done it, and Lagos State now has a template that others can easily copy or adopt. I hope my dear state can also learn from the Lagos experience and be able to do something like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Shapridin. I think it is, there is no shame in copying. If Lagos State has done it, other states can indeed shamelessly copy, and we'll support them 100%. So we have had feedback from all the panel members. We have only about 3 minutes left, so I'll take 2 interventions, 1 minute each, please. And very quickly, no protocol, just your name and your intervention. Thank you. Why is the...
Well, I'm Senator Barrow Jibrin. I represent Kano North in the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Well, we all know that electric power, electricity, is sine qua non to achieving any meaningful industrial development or economic development in general. Now, what is worrisome is that just as explained by the Chief Executive of Egbin Power Station, he said that his station is able to generate 1,320 megawatts, but it can only transmit 640 megawatts. Why? concerning the fact that we have huge deficit of electric power in the country. Why it is happening? And number two, the regulator said clearly, and in fact, the lady there, the moderator, one of the discussers there, said she gave a lot of praise. She commended the state government for Lagos State, the Lagos State government for being able to come up with the electric power reform out of Lagos State. Now, I want to ask you, as a national legislator, what is it that is contained in this legislation that is not contained in the national legislation guiding the operation of our power system in the country? I want to know that so that we can help. I mean, that can probably help us to amend the legislation that regulates the power operation in the country. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I will take one more question, and then if there's time, we will go back again. I can see a hand somewhere in the middle there. Sorry, the light. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Within the mix of various alternatives of power supply, from sun rays to coal to gas, which is probably the best option for us in Kano in particular. That's number one. Number two, I was made to understand that one of the major cement companies in this country is virtually at the moment sourcing its energy from coal in Gombe and coal surface mining. I don't know how this can impact not only in Gombe but also probably in places like Bauchi, Jigawa State, and probably Kano. To be specific, Ashaka Cement is now fueling its energy needs from that coal source. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
My name is Mohammed Sawananono, and I think you know me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think I'll ask Malam Sharfuddin to address the question raised by distinguished senator first, and then if any other panel members wants to comment, particularly the lead speaker, can do so. Because I think it's a pertinent question in terms of what is it in the Lagos State law that is not in the federal law. Why is it necessary for Lagos State to do a law? Madam Sharfuddin, would you like to comment on that?
Okay, thank you, Moderator. I think distinguished Senator, just like I mentioned, power or electricity business is something that is in the concurrent legislative list. So states are allowed to legislate on it. So it is within their right to legislate on that. But essentially, most of what they have in their legislation has to do with ensuring the commercial viability of electricity businesses. And part of it is what the Senate is even thinking of doing. That is legislation on electricity theft. Now, based on the Lagos Act, if you steal electricity, you will go to jail. They are setting up also mobile courts that will be able to handle offenders. They are setting up a sort of police also.
Okay. Let me
police
intervene there and ask Mr. Additioner. Do you want to comment very quickly? Then I'll come to you.
So these are some of the things that are not in the Act, which is in the Lagos Act.
Yeah.
Okay. My response to
very quickly,
all the questions, very quick one. First, with regards to why we can generate 1,320 ultimately, which we're going to be able to do in April, and why we're doing 640. The truth is that the cost and the price of electricity, that question is the elephant in the room that for some reasons everybody avoids to discuss. if the cost, I stated it earlier, if the cost of production in the entire value chain, gas, generation, transmission, and distribution, is higher than the tariff, the price set, there is no incentive whatsoever for any member of that value chain to continue to generate and supply electricity. So the question of the price needs to be dealt with. And to be dealt with, really, I would suggest that government still has a role to play. The era of privatization was born out of the ignorance of that time that felt after privatizing, government involvement is zero. No. Because there is an intervention element that is embedded in the tariff as we have it today. And that intervention element must be made available to the suppliers of service. Now, the person that is in Okokomaiko does not have the economic power to buy power like somebody in Ikoyi or VI. So that differential is one of the reasons for that.
I think we'll hold on to that and ask Madam Balarbe to comment very briefly.
One more comment.
Okay, just one more, quickly, please.
One more. With regards to Lagos State, what Lagos State has capacity
the state government and the discourse also, so that this deficit, because it's not easy, okay, for a genco like Additional, he generates power X amount of megawatts, he needs X amount of naira. But what happens to somebody who will...
Now, I believe that the panelists have done a yeoman's job on a very, very important and very significant sector.
Yes.
And I'm sorry we didn't have much time to take on inputs from the floor. But please join me to thank the panel members and to thank yourselves with a round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Thank you and God bless.
Panelists, please don't go yet. Let's copy what they did in the other room there. Governor Ambo, they took photographs with them. Sir, please come and take photographs with them. No, I can't say you can't join, sir. I'm just following the example of what you did over there, sir. This is a blessed panel, actually. Deputy Governors, Madam and Sir, please come over and take a photograph with them. Yes. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, this is what is going to happen. We have two very important plenary sessions next. There is the almighty internally generated revenue, IGR, which is the lifeblood of any government anywhere in the world, especially here in Nigeria. True. The next one is tourism, which is also the lifeblood of any serious society. Indeed, the indices that was thrown up recently showed that before the war in Syria, Syria in 2010 had more visitors, had more tourists than Australia and Greece put together. They had about 8.7 million tourists in 2010. But today, who wants to visit Syria? Nobody. We need to look at these two main topics, IGR and tourism. Now, we are going to break into two from here. The IGR discussion will take place in this hall. The tourism discussion would take place in the right side hall. We have to divide now. It's a pleasure for me actually to ask Governor Ambode to go to the right now because he was here in the last session, whilst Governor Ganduje will come to this side. Now, the IGR discussion will take place here and tourism will take place there. Let's quickly announce your panelists to you. Now, we have for internally generated revenue as our plenary session 2, best practices in enhancing and sustaining IGR in states. I have the pleasure of introducing you to the moderator, who is Mrs. Ifeko Omogui Okaru, Managing Partner, Compliance Professionals PLC, but who served recently as the Executive Chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Let's put our hands together for her as she goes there. I can see her. She's about to enter that section now. Then she will be joined by Mr. Aminu Mukhtar Danamu, Honorable Commissioner for Finance in Kano State. He's the lead discussant. Mr. Ayo Subar, Chairman, Lagos Internal Revenue Service, LIRS, will also be there as a discussant. Dr. Mohammed Sagagi, Manager, DFID Training Program in Kano. Then there is Mr. Akindaudu of Citibank Nigeria Limited. He is the CEO of Citibank. Then we have finally Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Head Tax and Corporate Advisory Services, PwC Nigeria, for IGR, to this left. Now to the right, we have plenary session 3. The topic there is tourism, unlocking the potentials of tourism in the states. The moderator is Mrs. Bolanle Austin Peters, founder Terra Culture. The lead discussant is Dr. Munzali A. Dantata, Executive Director, Zuma Institute for Globalization and Entrepreneurship. Mr. Koye Edu, Director, Ekpe Resort, is one of the discussants, and Professor Sule Bello of the Department of History, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, is the second discussant. That will be tourism to the right. We want everybody in this hall to decide which side they want to go, please. We don't want anybody sitting in this center hall. Go to the right or go to the left. Thank you. This is IGR in there. You need to go there. That is tourism. You can go there. Your Excellency, KB, now we have to decide where you want to be. You'll be in both places at the same time. That is tourism this way, sir, and this is IGR discussion. No, we're not using this hall for anything now. When we finish there, we're just coming here to take the wrap-up for the day. Yes, sir? You need money, sir. Any which way you look at it. Now, the governor of Lagos is at tourism. The governor of Kano is here for IGR. And the deputy governors will switch. Deputy Governor Lagos is in IGR. Deputy Governor Kano is in tourism. We have 35 minutes in all. And then His Excellency, the Governor of Kebbi State, is joining the IGR discussion. So once again, I'll just advise that we join either the IGR discussion or the tourism discussion. Thank you.